Sam C. Story time with Ronnie. There she is. What do we got? The Time Machine, Part 12. Well, where are we coming from? Well, we's coming from Duck Creek Campground, and we's heading towards Vegas, baby. All right, here we are about to pull out of the campground. I just hooked up the Jeep, and I forgot, of course, to take the handbrake off of the Jeep, so I had to scramble back in there and do that. So then I got, a couple miles away, and I started thinking, well, maybe I forgot some other stuff. So I knew there was a nice big open parking lot here I could slip into, and so I pulled over and checked everything out. Everything's good, of course. So boom, here we go down the hill towards going down the hill. And if you're not real comfortable with narrow roads and narrow mountain roads, that kind of thing, that's probably not the road for you. This is the going east from Duck Creek Village, and that is the more gentle approach to the area. The side from the west side over there, yikes! It's much longer and much steeper. So if you can come to it from the east side and hang out at Duck Creek Village. It's a beautiful little spot. And and there you go. Okay, so this story now, the Time Machine. He had barely escaped, and he was trying to find himself a nice place to hide out, and he found an old museum, and he got him some matches. He replenished his supply of matches, so now he's got that going for him. So here he was, and he's just remarking on the marvel of this box of matches that he found was like available for him and still in good condition, and he was kind of amazed at that. So we'll pick it up right there. Now, I think, should we talk more about, maybe we should talk more about this drive. It is an awfully pretty drive. Now, I said we was gonna start out in Duck Creek Village and end up in Vegas. That's what's gonna happen. About halfway through, I guess we'll kind of have a little boondocky spot there, and I thought we might do a transition then over into the to the Vegas side of this thing. But if I never get started on the story, we'll never get anywhere. So here we go. He found this. Oh, right. Okay, so he found a box of matches, and he found a jar of camphor. I found a far unlikelier substance, and that was camphor. I found it in a sealed jar that, by chance, I suppose, had been really hermetically sealed. I fancied at first that it was paraffin wax and smashed the glass accordingly. But the odor of camphor was unmistakable. In the universal decay, this volatile substance had chanced to survive, perhaps through many thousands of centuries. It reminded me of a sepia painting I had once seen done from the ink of a fossil belemnite. Belemnite. Don't know what that might be. That must have perished and become fossilized millions of years ago. I was about to throw it away, but I remembered that it was inflammable and burned with a good bright flame. Was, in fact, an excellent candle, and I put it in my pocket. I found no explosives, however, nor any means of breaking down the bronze doors. As yet, my iron crowbar was the most helpful thing I had chanced upon. Nevertheless, I left the gallery greatly elated. I cannot tell you all the story of that long afternoon. It would require a great effort of memory to recall my explorations at all the proper order. I remember a long gallery of rusting stands of arms, and how I hesitated between my crowbar and a hatchet or a sword. I could not carry both, however, and my bar of iron promised best against the bronze gates. There were numbers of guns, pistols, and rifles. The most were masses of rust, but many were in some new metal and still fairly sound. But any cartridges or powder that there may once have been had rotted into dust. One corner I saw was charred and shattered, perhaps, I thought, by an explosion among the specimens. In another place was a vast array of idols, Polynesian, Mexican, Grecian, Phoenician, every country on earth, I should think. And here, yielding to an irresistible impulse, I wrote my name upon the nose of a steatite monster from South America that particularly took my fancy. So he takes the only chance he gets to vandalize a museum, and he takes it. Huzzah, my friend. As the evening drew on, my interest waned. I went through gallery after gallery, dusty, silent, often ruinous. The exhibits sometimes mere heaps of rust and lignite, sometimes fresher. In one place I suddenly found myself near the model of a tin mine, and then by the merest accident I discovered, in an airtight case, 2 dynamite cartridges. I shouted, "Eureka!" and smashed the case with joy. Then came a doubt. I hesitated. Then, selecting a little side gallery, I made my essay. I never felt such a disappointment as I did in waiting 5, 10, 15 minutes. Okay, I think we's coming up on our little boondocking spot. Oh yeah, here we go. So, when I was putting this together, I started thinking about this little boondocking spot and some of the differences between a gas coach and a diesel coach. And some of that is the livability of the thing. So you can see here that we're kind of sitting right down on the ground. And that's, the big advantage of the diesel pusher is it sits on airbags as opposed to steel springs. The steel springs suspension is when it's at ride height, that's it. Like when you got a level, if you go up, it goes up. So with the diesel pusher or anything with some kind of air dump, suspension dump, where it goes right down, collapses right down to the bottom, and then you start leveling from there. Well, you got a better chance, So that's about all. We'll just go from there. That's one of the big difference in livability of a diesel coach versus a gas coach, or I guess we'll just go with steel spring coach versus an air ride coach. Is when you dump the air out, you're starting, 3 or 4 inches at least lower than you do at ride height, and then you can. You get to come up all the way past ride height and up to where the suspension droops all the way, and before your wheels come off the ground. Often you see them gas coaches with the front wheels are just up in the air, and you have to wonder just how do they get in and out of it. I mean, the door is 5 feet off the ground. All right, let's get back to this story then. Then came a doubt. I hesitated. Then, selecting a little side gallery, I made my essay. I never felt such a disappointment as I did in waiting 5, 10, 15 minutes for an explosion that never came. Of course, the things were dummies, as I might have guessed from their presence. I really believe that, had they not been so, I should have rushed off incontinentally and blown the Sphinx, bronze doors, and, as it proved my chances of finding the time machine, altogether into non-existence. It was after that, I think, that we came to a little open court within the palace. It was turfed, and I had 3 fruit trees. So we rested, refreshed ourselves. Toward sunset, I began to consider our position. Night was creeping upon us, and my inaccessible hiding place had still to be found. But that troubled me very little now. I had in my possession a thing that was, perhaps, the best of all defenses against the Morlocks. I had matches. I had the camphor in my pocket, too, if a blaze were needed. It seemed to me that the best thing we could do would be to pass the night in the open, protected by a fire. In the morning, there was the getting of the time machine. Towards that, as yet, I had only my iron mace. But now, with my growing knowledge, I felt differently towards those bronze doors. Up to this, I had refrained from forcing them, largely because of the mystery on the other side. They had never impressed me as being very strong, and I hoped to find my bar of iron not altogether inadequate for the work. Whew. There we go, guys. That's the end of that chapter. Here we go. Chapter 9. Oh, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this Vegas situation here. Oh, yeah. So we just barely getting into town, and, we realize that, there's some construction, and should we do this, and should we do that? Well, it never really saves you much, and yeah, you just kind of gotta wing it. And so I kind of winging it, and it just it takes a while to get through Vegas. There's construction, but we're all in the same boat, and there's always this big old mystery about Vegas. It's all exciting. You want to see those big buildings and stuff. And we have camped down on the Strip before. They used to have a KOA there at the Circus, I think it was. And I think it's probably something else now. And we resist taking the RV and doing a tour down the Strip. But if you like you want to take your RV to Vegas, there are options. I guess that's the point there. Okay, so here, let's get on this story. Get back to the story. So we're going to roll into chapter 9 now. Let me find out where we're at, and maybe we got a chance of getting it right. I doubt it, though. Okay, chapter 9. We emerged from the palace while the sun was still part above the horizon. I was determined to reach the White Sphinx early the next morning, and ere the dusk I proposed pushing through the woods that had stopped me on the previous journey. My plan was to go as far as possible that night, and then building a fire to sleep in the protection of its glare. Accordingly, as we went along, I gathered any sticks or dried grass I saw, and presently had my arms full of such litter. Thus loaded, our progress was slower than I had anticipated. and besides, Weena was tired, and I began to suffer from sleepiness too, so that it was full night before we reached the wood. Upon the shrubby hill of its edge, Weena would have stopped, fearing the darkness before us, but a singular sense of impending calamity that should indeed have served me as a warning drove me onward. I had been without sleep for a night and 2 days, and I was feverish and irritable. I felt sleep coming upon me, and the Morlocks with it. Yeah, there we are. We're starting to get all bound up there now. But, yeah, you're here for the story, right? I'm pretty sure, I don't think there was any dancing bears. No, I'm positive there wasn't any dancing bears. While we hesitated among the black bushes behind us, the dim against their blackness, I saw 3 crouching figures. There was scrub and long grass all about us, and I did not feel safe from their insidious approach. The forest, I calculated, was rather less than a mile across. If we could get through it to the bare hillside, there, as it seemed to me, was an altogether safer resting place. I thought that with my matches and my camphor, I could contrive to keep my path illuminated through the woods. Yet it was evident that if I was to flourish matches with my hands, I should have to abandon my firewood. So, rather reluctantly, I put it down. And then it came into my head that I would amaze our friends behind by lighting it. I was to discover the atrocious folly of this proceeding, but it came to my mind as an ingenious move for covering our retreat. I don't know if you ever thought what a rare thing flame must be in the absence of man in a temperate climate. The sun's heat is rarely strong enough to burn, even when it is focused by dewdrops, as is sometimes the case in more tropical districts. Lightning may blast and blacken, but it rarely gives rise to widespread fire. Decaying vegetation may occasionally smolder with the heat of its fermentation, but this rarely results in flame. In this decadence, too, the art of fire-making had been forgotten on the earth. The red tongues that went licking up my heap of wood were altogether new and strange thing to Weena. She wanted to run to it and play with it. I believe she would have cast herself into it had I not restrained her. But I caught her up, and in spite of her struggles, plunged boldly before me into the wood. For a little way, the glare of the fire lit the path. Looking back presently, I could see through the crowded stems that from my heap of sticks the blaze had spread to some bushes adjacent, and a curved line of fire was creeping up the grass of the hill. I laughed at that, and turned again to the dark trees before me. It was very black, and Weena clung to me convulsively, but there was still, as my eye grew accustomed to the darkness, sufficient light for me to avoid the stems. Overhead it was simply black, except where a gap of remote blue sky shone down upon here and there. I struck none of my matches because I had no hands free. Upon my left arm I carried my little one. In my right hand I had my iron bar. For some way I heard nothing but the crackling twigs under my feet, the fair rustle of the breeze above, and my own breathing, and the throb of the blood vessels in my ears. Then I seemed to know of a pattering about me. I pushed on grimly. The pattering grew more distinct, and then I caught the same queer sound and voice as I had heard in the underworld. There were evidently several of the Morlocks, and they were closing in upon me. Indeed, in another minute, I felt a tug at my coat, then something at my arm, and Weena shivered violently and became quite still. It was time for a match, but to get one, I must put her down. I did so, and as I fumbled with my pocket, a struggle began in the darkness about my knees. Oh, that's a pretty good place to stop. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks so much for coming, and we'll catch you next time. Oh, here's a little review of the next boondocking spot, another spot in the National Forest, and yeah, we kind of like that kind of thing. All right, guys. Sam, see, and we'll leave you just a little bit of Rosie. Oh, thank you, Big Rosie. You do your thing now.